for giving me the opportunity to express my views on the subject. Friends, we should also thank the epidemic corona for it gave us time to think, read, and act. It's only an attempt with the intention to enlighten our knowledge, taking advantage of the available time which we did not have previously when the epidemic has not arisen. The legislators, at their wisdom, have made enactments in order to satisfy the legal issues that arises or may arise at a future date. Yet, as the position of law is changing, as we get the experience by interpreting the provisions of law. Friends, let us today make an endeavor to go through the provisions of Article 37. Before starting, at the time of choosing the topic, I thought it was only a very small chapter to be discussed in the CPC. But when I started to explore, it was really interesting. Summary procedure. Previously, it was named as summary procedure on negotiable instruments. The words negotiable instruments after the word summary procedure was omitted by Act 104 of 1976. The object of summary procedure is to prevent unreasonable obstruction by the defendant who has a defense. Normally, a civil suit for recovery of money takes its own sweet time for disposal, and the challenging part of the litigation or the legal system is the execution of the degree obtained. As there is always a saying in the legal parlance that the trouble arises only at the time of the execution of the degree. Now, let us go into the provisions. To what the summary procedure applies? It applies to all written agreement which has quantified the amount payable to the promoter, to the negotiable instruments, even if the endorsement is made over the negotiable instruments as not negotiable, to a check, to your hundi, and a suit for recovery of rent under a lease deed is also maintainable under summary procedure. And latestly, it has been applied to the credit cards also. Friends, before going into the topic, let us read the provisions. As many times we have read, some might not have read. I have also not read at the college days. Now, for the benefit of all, I will read the provisions. Order 37, Rule 1. Courts and classes of suits to which the order is to apply. This order shall apply to the following courts, namely high courts, citizen courts, and courts of small classes and other courts. Provided that in respect of the courts referred to in class B, that is the other courts, the High Court may, by notification in the official gazette, restrict the operation of this order only to such categories of suits as it deems proper, and may also from time to time, as the circumstances of the case may require by subsequent notification in the official gazette, further restrict, enlarge, vary the categories of the suits to be brought under the operation of this order as it deems proper. Now let us go to section 2, sub-rule 2. Class 1 reads, subclass 1 reads, a suit to which this order applies may, if the plaintiff desires to proceed hereunder, be instituted by presenting a plaint which shall contain a specific averment to the effect that the suit is filed under this order. This is a very basic or a precondition for this, for the filing of the suit under this chapter. Normally, we file a suit under Order 7, Rule 1. We don't mention any other provisions in an ordinary suit. But in the case of a summary suit, a specific averment to that effect that the suit is filed or laid under Order 37 has to be mentioned. And in another aspect, there should also be a pleading in the plaint that no relief which does not fall within the ambit of this rule has been claimed in the plaint. That is Article 37, Rule 2, Subclass 1. This specific averment has to be made in the plaint. And another precondition is that after the name of the suit, title in the cast title, after the number of the suit, there should be an endorsement or an inscription that it is there under Article 37 of the CPC. But as we have seen, many plaints, only the body where we mention the provision of law, Article 37 alone is mentioned, and the averment that no other pleadings or no other case which does not form under the ambit of Article 37 is made. These two only will be found in all the plaints. But the mentioning of the provision of Article 37 below the case number in many of the suits is not found, which is a mandatory. Yet the courts are retaining in the suits, that being the main principle of law, that law is the handmaid of justice. And let us go to the subclass 2. The summons of the suit shall be in form 4, Appendix B, or in such other form as may from time to time be prescribed. This is very, very important. Normally, while filing a suit under Order 7, we have a separate summons. But the summons to be filed under Order 37 is entirely different. Because it is under form 4. We have a very good experience in our office. One of our good friend of us, he filed a suit, go under Order 37, served on us a summons, a normal summons, and not a summons under Order 37. So, on the date of the hearing, from our office, we filed a report. It was opposed by the other side by saying that he has not filed an application for a leave to defend. So, he has no locus standi at all to the present. That is what, even though he is having a appellate, we replied to the court by saying that, no, my friend has served us a summons, an ordinary summons, and not a summons under Article 37. So, it is only an ordinary suit. So, I did not file an application for leave to defend. That was our argument. But other side tried to misguide us as well as the court by saying that it is by mistake we have sent a summons the regular summons and not a summons under form 4 by stating that it is a typographical error. That is what we usually say in the courts to defend our mistakes. We replied, equally, that could have been a typographical error by mentioning that the suit is filed under Order 37, when in fact the suit summons has been served is only an ordinary summons. The court came in aid of us by saying that since the summons which has been served on the defendant is only an ordinary summons, it cannot be treated as a suit filed under Article 37. So, friends, I reiterate that whenever we file a suit under Article 37, we have to be very careful regarding the mentioning of the provision as well as the averment that no relief which does not fall under the ambit of this rule has been claimed, and the inscription of the provision Article 37 below the case number, and more particularly the summons which is to be filed for the summary suit. Next aspect is Rule 3, Sub-Rule 3. As soon as, this is the most important one, the defendant shall not defend the suit referred to in Sub-Rule 1 unless he enters an appearance, and in default of his entering an appearance, the allegations in the plaint shall be deemed to be admitted and the plaintiff shall be entitled to a degree for any sum not exceeding the sum mentioned in the summons. So, what are important in the under these provisions is the entering of appearance as well as the sorry for this. You have to be very careful while mentioning the amount, the sum in the summons as to what is we have claimed. If you are not clear about that, if you say one amount in the plaint and one amount in the summons, so what you have claimed in the summons, that alone you are entitled. Next is order 3, which rule 3, which is very important. I will read the provision. In the suit to which this order applies, the plaintiff shall, together with the summons under Rule 2, serve on the defendant a copy of the plaint and annexures thereto. So, the mandatory duty on the part of the plaintiff is to serve on the defendant not only the summons, but also the copy of the plaint together with the annexures, namely the documents. Normally, the attitude of any advocate is by saying that I did not serve you the copies in any other suit. But in the suit under Article 37, the serving of the documents is mandatory. And this is to be done at any time within 10 days of such service. The defendant has to enter an appearance either in person or through pleader. In case he shall file in court an address for service of notices on him. And the next 3 subclass 2 I will read. Unless otherwise ordered, all summonses, notices, and other judicial processes required to be served on the defendant shall be deemed to have been duly served on him if they are left at the address given by him for such service. So, the serving of the documents on the defendant is only after the serving on the plaintiff the address of service. Next is subclass 3. On the date of entering the appearance, notice of such appearance shall be given by the defendant to the plaintiff's pleader, or if the plaintiff sues in person, to the plaintiff himself, either by notice delivered or sent by a prepaid letter directed to the address of the plaintiff's pleader or of the plaintiff as the case may be. This is also very much important. The entire procedure for the appearance of the defendant is very important one, as this gives rise to various problems. I will read subclass 4. If the defendant enters an appearance, the plaintiff shall thereafter serve on the defendant a summons for judgment in form number 4A in Appendix B or such other form as may be prescribed from time to time. So, duty is cast upon the plaintiff to serve on the defendant a summons for judgment on the entering of appearance of the defendant. The time prescribed is returnable not less than 10 days from the date of service, supported by an affidavit verifying the cause of action and the amount claimed and stating that in his belief there is no defense of the suit. Next, we will go to sub-rule 5. The defendant may at any time within 10 days in the service of such summons for judgment, by affidavit or otherwise, disclose such facts as may be deemed sufficient to entitle him to defend, apply on such summons for leave to defend such suit, and leave to defend may be granted to him unconditionally or upon such terms as they appear to the court or judge to be just. This is sub-rule 5 is very important because we have more or less narrate or in a crispy manner, we have to say what are all the defenses for the suit laid by the plaintiff in the affidavit. Because in the under filing an application under, for seeking leave for leave to defend, the parties are not permitted to adduce any evidence. Only upon the documents relied upon both the sides, the court decides whether to grant conditional leave or not, or to reject the leave, or whatever, or simply to simpliciter for grant of leave. There is also a proviso clause provided that the leave to defend shall not be refused unless the court is satisfied that the facts disclosed by the defendant do not indicate that he has a substantial defense to raise, or that the defense intended to be put by the defendant is frivolous or vexatious. Here again, there is no clarity regarding the extent to which the defendant has to prove in the application for leave to defend. Courts only say, by way of interpretation, for grant of leave to defend, there should have been triable issues. Again, what is triable issues have not been defined under the CPC. Judges, by their wisdom, by applying the provisions of law, have tried to explain what are triable issues. Regarding that aspect, I will narrate you afterwards. Next, another proviso is provided further that where a part of the amount claimed by the plaintiff is admitted by the defendant to be due from him, leave to defend the suit shall not be granted unless the amount so admitted to be due is deposited by the defendant in court. This is a case where the defendant partly admits the claim, or where the defendant admits the claim of the plaintiff in court. In either case, leave can be granted to the defendant only on a condition that the defendant has to furnish the amount as security or deposit, because the grant of leave is a discretionary power of the court, and court may either grant leave conditionally or unconditionally. At times, it may even fix time for the disposal of the suit. So, friends, while drafting the application for leave to defend, let us be clear on what the defendant actually wants to express in the affidavit. Let us discuss with the defendant, get his concurrence, and thereafter make an averment in the affidavit regarding the admission of the claim. Because when once it is admitted, duty is cast upon the defendant. The plaintiff has no duty at all, because when once you admit the amount, duty is upon you to disprove thereafter. Next is the situation visualized by the legislature, where the defendant has not applied for a leave to defend the suit. It is subclass 6. I read A. If the defendant has not applied for leave to defend, or if such application has been made and is refused, the plaintiff shall be entitled to judgment forthwith. Here it imposes two cases where he has not applied for leave to defend. The application made by the defendant has been refused. So two situations. In those two cases, the plaintiff is entitled for a judgment forthwith. No evidence is needed on the side of the plaintiff. So now what our understanding by reading this 6 is that when once the defendant has failed to apply for leave, or when the leave is refused, passing of a judgment and degree in the suit is automatic. It will be given an illusion to us that the passing of the degree in the suit is dependent upon the grant of the leave. Though it may appear to be so, courts have repeatedly held that the dependent theory is not applicable to Order 37. Here, let us visualize a situation where the defendant has challenged the refusal of a leave to grant by way of revision or appeal, since both has been held by the Supreme Court as well as our Madras High Court, but they are challengeable. If that be a situation where the defendant has preferred an appeal or a revision, and the appellate forum or the High Court has set aside the order passed, set aside the order of the dismissal of the petition for leave to defend, that means the application for leave to defend has been restored. In such a case, the normal presumption of any person is that since the passing of the degree in the suit is based upon the grant of leave, refusal to grant of leave, refusal to grant of leave. If the petition for grant of leave is restored by way of an appeal or by a revision, the degree is automatically set aside. That is not so, my friends. You have the degree judgment and degree passed in the suit has to be agitated by the defendant. If that is not done so, the mere setting aside of the order or the degree passed in the petition for grant of leave to defend cannot give the defendant any right. So, in a nutshell, there will be only a degree which has remained unchallenged by the defendant. That is what the presumption is. Next, subclass B, I will read. If the defendant is permitted to defend as to the whole or any part of the claim, the court or judge may direct him to give such security and within such time as may be fixed by the court or judge, and that on failure to give such security within the time specified by the court or judge, or carry out such other directions as they have been given by the court or the judge, the plaintiff shall be entitled to judgment forthwith. Here, let us assume a situation where the defendant has applied for praying for grant of leave to defend the suit, and the court has also granted the leave on certain conditions. And if the defendant has not satisfied any of the conditions granted by the court, that will not give any right to the defendant to contest the suit. The suit will be decided forthwith as if it will revert to the original position, where as if the defendant has not applied for the leave to defend, and the plaintiff is entitled for the judgment forthwith. Next, subclass 7. It's a very interesting provision. The court or judge may, for sufficient cause shown by the defendant, excuse the delay of the defendant in entering an appearance or in applying for leave to defend the suit. So, what is sufficient cause has not been defined under the CPC. Unlike in R9 Rule 13, a case where the defendant files an application for setting aside the ex parte degree, what is to be stated by the defendant in the affidavit is the reason for his inability to appear. But whereas in the provision under Order 37, it is slightly different. It says sufficient cause. But we have to now read with Rule 4. I'll read the Rule 4, that is the power to set aside the degree. After degree, the court may, under special circumstances, set aside the degree and if necessary, stay or set aside execution and may give leave to the defendant to appear to the summons and to defend the suit if it seems reasonable to the court so to do, and on such terms as the court thinks fit. First, what is important is special circumstance. Again, what is special circumstance? Over the CPC defines what is a special circumstance. Already I told, Order 9, Rule 13, simply how can say the reason which precluded you from appearing. But for when you file an application of Order 37, Rule 4, what is required is you have to narrate a special circumstance. Again, special circumstance, as I already stated, it is not defined under the CPC. Courts, by their wisdom, while applying these provisions, have held what is special circumstance. Special circumstance, the dictionary reads an extraordinary situation. And another situation is at the time of setting aside the degree, the court can also grant leave to the defendant to appear. So, mere grant of as an order for setting aside the degree is of no use, and court has to grant a leave to the defendant for defending the suit. And also, here also the power is granted to the court to fix the terms on which the conditions in the leave to defend can be granted. So, my friends, the position Rule 3, Rule 4, that is the play area of any advocate, any trial lawyer. So we have to be careful at every stage when you are handling the case under Article 37. Next, I will go to the Rule 5. That is power to order, bill, etc. to be deposited with the court officer of court. In any proceedings under this order, the court may order the bill, hundi or note on which the suit is founded to be forthwith deposited with an officer of the court, and may further order that all proceedings shall be stayed until the plaintiff gives security for the cause thereof. Again, as far as this Rule 5 is concerned, I searched in all the books as well as the online also. There is no case law for this particular provision. And next is Rule 6. I will read the provision. Recovery of cost of noting non-acceptance of dishonored bill or note. The holder of every dishonored bill of exchange or promissory note shall have the same remedies for the recovery of the expenses incurred in noting the same for non-acceptance or non-payment or otherwise by reason of such dishonor as he has under this order of recovery of the amount of such bill or note. This will satisfy the cost to be incurred by expenses to be incurred by the defendant while presenting a negotiable instrument. Suppose if a check is presented and it is dishonored, the plaintiff is entitled not only to claim the amount mentioned in the negotiable instrument, but also the expenses of dishonoring the, let us assume dishonor of a check. Banks will not normally deduct an amount from the amount of the account holder when the check is presented. So, if the amount is very less, it is negligible. Suppose, let us assume where the amount is heavy, the amount to be deducted from the account of the plaintiff will be more. So, this Rule 6 empowers the plaintiff to claim those amounts also which the plaintiff has incurred because of the failure of the defendant to honor the same. And again, as far as this rule is concerned, there is no case law at all. It is only by experience the judges are passing the claim of the expenses made by the plaintiff of dishonoring or non-acceptance of the negotiable instrument. Next provision is Rule 7. Say as provided by this order, the procedure in suits hereunder shall be the same as the procedure in suits instituted in the ordinary manner. Again, as far as this rule is concerned, there is no case law. It is only by practice. Now, by going through the entire Order 37, I have read, friends, I have read the entire provision. While going through the entire provision, what have been contemplated or what have been mentioned in the Order 37 is only regarding the appearance or non-appearance of the defendant alone. The appearance or appearance is there, non-appearance of the plaintiff, visualizing that situation, no provision has been mentioned under Order 37. Under that circumstance, this Rule 7 comes to the aid. Let us assume a situation where the plaintiff has failed to appear. In that case, the court may dismiss the suit. Under the circumstances, the plaintiff cannot be left with any remedy by simply saying that no provision is mentioned in Order 37. In that case, we have to file an application under Order 9, Rule 9. Normally, we will file a rendered provision of Section 151, which is the class in which is a section mentioned by any advocate who forgets the provision of law. So that comes to the aid of the plaintiff for filing application for restoring a suit which was dismissed for default. And this provision, my view is, also enables the application of Section 5 of the Limitation Act. Because these provisions under Order 37 mentions at every stage what all to be done by the parties. In that case, by the defendant, I will restrict my statement. It states about the defendant. If any act is done beyond that period under Order 37, the plaintiff has to file an application for leave to defend within 10 days. And if not, the suit will be degreed. In case for setting aside the degree, then Article 123 comes to the aid of the defendant. It stipulates that 30 days is a time for setting aside the ex parte orders made. If any act is to be done by the defendant beyond the period of 30 days mentioned under Article 123, then the only aid for the defendant is under Section 5. Friends, I will repeat, Section 5 is applicable for Order 37 both for the plaintiff as well as the defendant. Now, friends, we have been discussing about the word tribal issue, and I have been saying that the word tribal issue is not defined under CPC. Judicial decisions have defined the word tribal issue as a method to find out whether the defendant would be able to resist the suit successfully if he proves the case. So, friends, I recall, for the grant of leave to defend, raising of a tribal issue by the defendant in the affidavit filed in support of the application for grant of leave to defend is mandatory. If no tribal issue is made out, the grant of leave cannot be granted and the same has to be dismissed. If the same is dismissed, then the automatic provision is the passing of the degree, the plaintiff will be forthwith entitled to a degree. I will further clarify this tribal issue. It is nothing but a fair dispute to be tried as the meaning of a document on which the claim is based. Here, the claim under Article 37 is based on a written agreement or a negotiable instrument. If that agreement or the negotiable instrument is disputed by the defendant, the meaning in the sense, the veracity or the legality of the document, if that is raised, then the defendant will be entitled to a leave to defend. Here again, the courts at the time of granting the leave to defend has to apply its mind whether any triable issue has been raised by the defendant. Even if the court has a doubt regarding the bona fide of the case put forth by the defendant in the affidavit, the court has discretionary power either to reject the application for leave to defend, or it may impose some conditions for grant of leave. So we have to be very careful at the time of drafting the affidavit for leave to defend. Sorry for a moment, friends. Normally, what will be the attitude of a trial advocate or a lawyer is that let us file an application, let us see what is going to happen at the time of the inquiry. We will try to disprove we'll try to prove our case based upon the documents filed by the plaintiff. So, if you take that leisurely approach or a casual approach, then we will be in swoop. Because I again reiterate, the grant of leave is a discretionary power of the court. Next, my friends, the topic in the word special circumstance I already stated has not been defined under the CPC. If you see the dictionary, it reads something exceptional in character, extraordinary, significant, uncommon. So, while filing an application for setting aside the degree, it is not sufficient, it is not appropriate to simply state the reason for our non-appearance or a sufficient cause alone. More than that is required under Order 37. Let us assume a case where the present lockdown announced by the court. Let us assume a situation where the court has issued summons prior to lockdown and the hearing date is thereafter. Let us also assume a situation where the courts are functioning and also the situation where the defendant has been prevented, because now in certain districts there is lockdown, complete lockdown. Certain districts there is no lockdown. I mean, lockdown is limited. And if the defendant is in another case where he is unable to come to the court, which has issued the summons, he can plead this as a special circumstance because it is extraordinary. The spread of the epidemic is not normal circumstance. Let us also assume a situation where he undergoes any medical treatment, or some of his close relative has expired within his house. In that circumstance, the defendant cannot be expected to come and appear before the court. So, though the special circumstance is not defined, friends, I repeat, for at the time of filing an application or setting aside the ex parte degree, we have to be very careful to try to frame out a case. At times we have to do to safeguard the rights of the parties, because the right of a party cannot be denied by technicalities, that is by view. In such be the circumstance, the defendant, the client, is relying solely upon his advocate, and we as advocates have to be very careful, doubly cautious while drafting an application for setting aside the degree. Friends, I now go to the citations. The oldest citation which I could rely upon is of the year 1951, passed by our Madras High Court. It is the judgment pronounced by our great judge, Justice P.V. Rajamandar, who was the Chief Justice of our Madras High Court. A very interesting question arose in this case as to whether Order 37 is applicable to original site. Friends, at this juncture, I want to say that Order 37, Rule 1 was inserted by Act 104 of 1976, and this Rule 1 was not applicable. Rule 1, I recall my memory, the applicability of the Order 37 to the courts, to the High Court, Citizen Court, Small Class Court, and to other courts which the High Court may notify. So this case has arisen before the Amendment Act 104 of 1976, and probably the fairness of the judge as well as the advocate can be seen in this. The advocate who filed the case has very boldly stated before the court that there is no case law at all regarding this aspect. The aspect is applicability of Order 37 to the High Court original site. And the judge was also very fair enough to record the same, venture it by laying a law as to whether Order 37 is applicable to high courts or not. They have referred to various provisions, and one important aspect or provision of law which they relied upon was Order 49. For the convenience sake of my friends, I will read as to Order 49. Honestly speaking, friends, I have not read this provision at all before seeing this citation. This says, Order 49, Rule 3, I am reading, friends. Application of the rules. The following rules shall not apply to any chartered high court in exercise of its ordinary or extraordinary original civil jurisdiction, namely Rule 10 and Rule 11, classes B, C of Order 7, and Rule 3 of Order 10, Rule 2 of Order 16, and Order 38, Rule 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16. Order 20, Rule 1 to 8. Order 23, Rule 7. Order 41, Rule 35. So, the CPC has categorized what are all the provisions of CPC it shall not apply to the chartered high courts. Under this Order 49, friends, the Order 37 has not been mentioned. Justice Rajamanna, known for his legal acumen, has said that Order 49 Rule 3 does not preclude the applicability of Order 37, and so held that the Order 37 is applicable to the original site. We rarely find such a judge today. Next oldest judgment is AR 1953, Madras 909. This is the case of Madras High Court again, pronounced by Justice Govinda Menon Given was. This was a case, a very peculiar case, where the hearing date of the case was mentioned wrongly in the summons by the court, and the plaintiff tried to take advantage of the same by sticking to the technicalities, by saying that the defendant has not filed an application for leave to defend within the time of 10 days, and so pleaded that the plaintiff is entitled for a degree as prayed for. Justice Govinda Menon came to the aid of the defendant by saying that when it is a mistake of the court, he has recorded in this judgment, when there is a mistake of the court should come to the aid of the defendant. And further, his lordship has held that the time of 10 days mentioned in the provision under the Order 37 is flexible when the hearing date has been mentioned. These two particular judgments, friends, I was really fascinated by the way the judges have appreciated the provision of law. Next leading case under Order 37 is AR 2016 SC 5321, formerly called as IDBI Institution case. This was pronounced by the Honorable Supreme Court, Justice Lokin Nariman. It's a very landmark case. Till that period, the position of law under Order 37 was varying, and his lordship has stipulated what are all the position which can be visualized under Order 37. I will, for the convenience of our friends, I will read one by one. If the defendant satisfies the court that he has a substantial defense, a defense that is likely to succeed, unconditional leave to be granted. So, again, his lordship stresses substantial defense, a defense which is likely to succeed in the sense, succeed in the case of the defendant. In that circumstance, unconditional leave to be granted. Here, the testing point is to prove the trustworthiness or to create a doubt in the mind of the judge about the genuinity of the averments in the plaint as well as in the documents. Next is a indicating triable issues. Again, a fair and reasonable defense. Unconditional leave to be granted. Here again, my friends, we have to be very careful at the time of filing an application for grant of leave to defend. In the very same judgment, his lordship has held that if frivolous or no genuine triable issues have been raised by the defendant in the affidavit, leave has to be rejected. And one another position is, if any part of the amount claimed by the defendant is admitted as due leave to be granted unless the amount so admitted is deposited. So, this is also very important area because we have to be very careful while mentioning in the affidavit by admitting the part of the claim or the whole of the claim as the case may be. Simply because for the purpose of getting for a leave to defend, we should not plead something which is not cannot be substantiated by the defendant. We have to clarify twice or thrice with the client before stating or admitting in the affidavit that the amount as claimed by the plaintiff, a part of the amount, a part of the amount. In this IDBI case, the defense raised by the defendant, it created a doubt in the bona fideness of the defendant in the minds of the judges. Like the sense, the judges doubted the bona fideness in the claim, in the defense of the defendant. So the prayer for grant of leave was rejected. So we have to point the words in such a fashion that it does not give a ground to doubt the genuineness of the claim made in the affidavit. And another famous case for grant of leave is DK Enterprises versus Shiva Steels, reported in 2010, 9 SEC 256. Here again, the affidavit should disclose triable issues, and if the affidavit does not disclose triable issue, the leave petition should be dismissed. Here, I would like to emphasize one point. Simply, we should not say in the affidavit that the document is the document based upon which the claim of the plaintiff cannot be entertained in one word. We have to give the reasons or the basis on which we are defending the case of the plaintiff. Not only we have to prove our case, we have to disprove the case of the defendant only in the affidavit. And we cannot, without any averment in the affidavit, we cannot rely upon the documents. As it is very basic in civil law, that without any pleadings, documents have no relevance. I reiterate, the documents cannot be relied upon by the defendant in the leave to defend application without any averment in the affidavit. So we have to be very careful at the time of framing the, in drafting the affidavit. We have to express what all we want to put forth by our oral arguments in the court. We have to reduce that into the affidavit. If that is not done, we will miss out some points, and that will be advantaged for the plaintiff. Another citation for setting aside the degree. Already told you, Order 37 Rule 4 enables the court for setting aside the degree. This is the case law. TVS Skyshop Limited versus Reliance Communication Infra Limited, reported in 2013, 11 SEC 754. In this case, Justice G.S. Singhi and Justice B. Gopala Gowda have held that the affidavit filed in support of the petition for grant of leave to defend, petition for setting aside the ex parte degree, has stated the special circumstance required for setting aside the degree. Normally, the attitude of any advocate with claim of filing Order 9 Rule 13 will be is we have stated the reasons for allowing the application that will suffice for setting aside the degree, and we will also try to take an advantage by saying that the degree obtained is not passed on merits. So I am intending for setting aside of that will be the normal approach of any normal approach of any advocate. But at the time of filing an application for setting aside the degree under Order 37 is very special. Not only the provision is special, the petition for setting aside is also special. We have to state the special circumstance which prevented the defendant from appearing before the court. Unless and until that special circumstance is not defined, it's not stated in the affidavit, again in the affidavit, the petition for setting aside the degree will be dismissed. Extraordinary, I reiterate, friends, extraordinary circumstance has to be mentioned in the affidavit. And another important or normal query or doubt which rises in any council is that whether appeal or revision lies as against the order passed in the petition for grant of leave to defend. That has been settled by the Honorable Supreme Court in Bada Arun Asbestos versus Gujarat Water Supply case, reported in 2009 to SEC 432. Therein, the lordships have held that not only a regular appeal is maintainable, revision is also maintainable under 115 and 227. As regarding the applicability of 115 of CPC, the lordships say that for filing a revision under 115, what is mandatory requirement is that the application, that the grant of degree should not have disposed of the suit. Here, the refusal to grant of degree has not disposed the suit, and so 115 is applicable. When 115 is applicable, the lordships have also held Article 227 of the Constitution of India is also applicable. This has been followed by our Honorable High Court Madras. His Lordship Justice Nagamuthu J. has applied the principles in Shivasu Canadian Clear International Limited, reported in 2013 to CDC 305. This is also again a landmark case. And another doubt normally which arises is whether the provisions of Order 37 is applicable to credit cards. This has also been settled in Praveen Kumar versus HSBC, reported in 2014 to CBC 828. Because credit cards are issued only based upon a written contract. And since the basis is a written contract, the suit under Order 37 is maintainable. Further, friends, while reading conjoint reading of CPCA Order 37 as well as the Commercial Courts Act, a question arose in my mind, a debatable issue, as to what will be the beneficial to the litigant, whether the filing of a suit under Order 37 or a filing of a suit under the Commercial Courts Act 2015. My view is that at the time of framing or formulating the Commercial Courts Act, the legislatures have kept in mind the principles or the purpose of introducing the summary procedure of Order 37 in the CPC. So that is reflected when we read the refer to Rule 2 and 3 of the Chapter 13A, the procedure for the conduct of these commercial suit. That is, my view is that is those provisions are in line with Order 37. Friends, the wisdom of legislators is tested before the court of law, the various interpretations. So my respectful view is regarding the applicability of Order 37 under the commercial courts. The filing of the suits under the Commercial Courts Act 2015 will be more beneficial, as there is a time stipulated, fixed time stipulated under the Act. So that will be more beneficial. and the principles of conducting the suit under the Commercial Courts Act is in line with Order 37. So I will stop with this. I think I have taken much of your time. Friends, I thank you very much for your valuable time.
Friends, I think we have heard, we have been enlightened on the provisions of filing a suit under as a summary suit. I now request the participants to raise their hands for any queries to be clarified, so that we can, in by order, allow the persons to raise the questions. And once the person has asked the questions, they can unmute themselves after asking the question, so that the participant can easily understand the clarifications. I now request the participant to raise the hands so that I can unmute them.
Mani, before allowing the persons to ask the question, only one or two lines I want to say. Friends, I have made an endeavor to concise the various provisions of Order 37, and also I have laid down, expressed my views on that. Certain points I might have missed out. If I have missed out any points to be mentioned, you are at free liberty to enlighten me. That's all, Manikandan. The participants can proceed with the questions.
Yeah, dear friends, there'll be an icon on the right side of the participants column to raise the hands option. Once you click on that, I'll be able to unmute you, so that the questions can be raised. Now I'll unmute Mr. Ravi Meenakshi Sundaram to raise his questions.
Sir, after filing case by the bank or institution,
Yes.
both the parties not attended the first hearing, and the court has adjourned after a month second hearing by adjudicating fresh summons, fresh notice to both the parties.
You mean
Whether the respondent now get the leave to defend provision.
You mean a suit under Order 37?
Yes.
Sir, it is the duty of the defendant to file an application by entering appearance. You have to file an application in the court, even though the hearing date is after a month. Duty is cast upon you to file an application for leave to defend within 10 days of service of summons. You should not wait for the hearing date. If you wait for the hearing date, the Order 37 will not wait for you.
I now call upon Mr. Kanmani to raise his question.
Good evening, brother.
Good evening, good evening.
Good evening, brother. How are you?
Yes. Fine, brother.
Sir,
How about you?
fine, brother. Only one question from my side. If
Yes.
you are filing 138 under before magistrate court, whether
Yes.
shall we file parallelly before under summary proceedings?
Yeah, we can file, provided we get the original documents.
Yeah, in adding to
Okay.
brothers.
Without the documents, either of the things cannot be filed. And before one forum, you can get a certificate copy and file it.
Yeah.
Finally, you can do it. There is no bar at all.
Okay. If so, you are filing whether WGO body will apply.
That will not apply. That is only by institution of under 138 proceedings only a penal law. And the institution of somebody suit is for recovery. That cannot be equated. Both cannot be equated.
Okay.
You can simultaneously raise both the avenues.
Brother Kanmani,
Shall I ask
Only one thing, but the dismissal of the 138 proceedings might have a bearing on the civil suit. or for the grant of
So,
leave.
okay. Shall I ask one more question, brother?
Yes, if possible, I'll answer.
Obviously, you will have. Okay. If you are getting an order before the magistrate court
Yes,
for double the amount as per the provision,
yes.
we are getting the double the amount as per the 138 proceedings. And
You
before.
mean compensation, fine amount.
Oh, thank you, brother.
I now call upon Mr. Rajasingara Velan Ramnath to raise his question.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Sir, that summary suit proceedings are there, no, sir? Once,
Yes.
if the leave to defend is allowed by the court, if the leave
Yes.
is granted,
Yes.
is there any time bound to complete the case, sir? If
As
summary
per
suit,
the provisions of part of the result, there is no time limit. No time is stipulated, sir.
okay. Then
But
the
once the
proceedings will be
written statement is filed, once the written statement is filed, leave is granted, written statement is filed, trial will start immediately. Why should we wait for the trial? Trial to begin.
okay.
I don't find
Is it
any other
clarified, sir? Is it clarified?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't find any other person raising their
I have
hands.
a question.
Yeah.
Sir, so now there is a position where there can be either. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So there is a possibility
I
that
think the problem may be.
both suit under order 37, also a regular suit can be filed. Now, in which case should
Cannot be both Ramayapam. How can you institute two suits for the same relief?
No, I'm not filing two suits. I'm saying prior to filing, I have cause of action for filing in one of the two. As in,
you may choose under order 7 or under order 37. This is your choice.
But what would be a more prudent choice and under what conditions?
I put a choice to order 37. Because once the defendant is refused grant of leave, settled for a degree, why should you wait the face the order of a trial? So filing under order 37 will be actually correct. Because there is no time limit at all under regular suit and order 7.
True.
Once under order 37, if the leave is refused, suit has to be decreed.
Yeah, adding to Brother Swaprakash answer, we have another option under commercial suits. You can also try on that, provided it falls under the list of.
He is asking which is beneficial.
Whether
a regular suit or a suit under order 37.
No, I want to. True, but I want to keep in mind other things also, as in the court fees. Yes. And I want to keep in chance the probability at appeal that I will be remitted back to another trial. So keeping those things in mind.
Whether it's a normal suit or a under chapter suit, it does not vary at all.
Yeah. Only the time restrictions is there.
Time stipulation only varies.
It actually helps the result oriented one.
So order 37 only will be beneficial in all aspects. So if you want to give a finality at the earliest,
yeah,
I will use order 37 is beneficial.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, you are.
Sir, if the leave to defend is rejected, can we file another case, sir? Another suit?
How can you? There will be a degree as against you, no?
Sometimes it happens that you are not able to, or you have not filed leave.
It will be restricted, no?
Like under the normal suit, we cannot file, sir. Only.
Yeah, your right is precluded. Cause of action is one and the same. How can you have two suits for one cause of action? So under that pretext will be rejected.
Okay.
Now,
And
yeah,
one
go ahead.
more, sir. I
Yes.
have doubt regarding this special circumstances and sufficient cause, sir.
Yes, yes.
So,
It's only very, it is only too hypothetical and we have to be very careful. That's what I would say. There is no definition at all under the CPC.
yeah.
Normally, what we state in an application for setting aside ex parte degree and R9 Rule 13, more than that is required. That's what I could say. There is no yardstick for that.
Okay, but still it gives specific
Room is a
distinguishing.
discretionary power. You have to keep in
Yeah.
mind the discretionary power of the court.
Okay. Okay, sir.
I
Okay,
think I
thank
have
you, sir.
clarified you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I now request my father, Ananarajan, to raise his question.
Hello.
I think the question will be much
More difficult for me to answer
more
now.
tough. I think now Brother Suryaprakash will be passing a judgment for the query that is going to be raised now.
I don't think so. I can even answer. How can I go pass a judgment?
That will be much easy in passing a judgment because you have a right of appeal.
But in the sense you say that I'm going to blabber.
No, it's not a question. It's not a question of blabbering. It's a question of right of appealing. Appealing to a higher forum is also there. Therein, there'll be bench.
No higher forum as of has been fixed.
Yes, we'll go ahead with. Yeah, we'll go ahead with the questions.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
It's audible.
Yeah.
Not audible.
I am not putting up any question, additional question, but only. No, 1 minute, 1 minute. I am only complimenting the lecture given by Mr. Siva Prakash. This is not a suit specifically reserved for negotiable instruments alone. This is a suit covering the all liquidated sum. Any ascertained liquidated sum, you can file this suit.
That's what I told in the beginning itself.
Everyone was putting the question as in the negotiable instruments.
I didn't have the opportunity to read the questions.
It is a chapter dealing with all liquidated amounts due.
Yes, correct. And also written agreements.
Yes. And another question is, as raised by Jayanti Shah, once you have opted to file a suit under Order 37 and your leave to defend is granted or denied, you cannot go for one another suit, a different suit.
Yes, sir.
Because you already exhausted the cause of action.
Will apply.
The judicata will apply.
Yes.
So you have already exhausted your rights under that particular cause of action. Thank you.
Anything?
Yeah, is any other person to raise a question so that I can ask the speaker to reply on? Because I'm not able to find any person raising their hands to raise a question. I think everyone is fully clarified with the commentary that has been.
I think I have not clarified the participants.
No, probably Mr. Ramesh Puri will be raising the question. I think Mr. Ramesh Puri is eagerly waiting to raise the question. So I'll unmute Mr. Ramesh Puri.
You are inventing a problem now.
No, it's not. It's a question of getting anything further on the topic.
Well, later sense.
I think, I call upon Mr. Ramesh to raise his questions.
Prakash,
Yes.
I understand that we have a pecuniary jurisdiction even for applicable for summary suit. Am I right?
Some?
Pecuniary jurisdiction.
There is no pecuniary jurisdiction. And it is applicable to
Summary suit can be filed at various courts, right?
Yeah. It says it is applicable to High Court, Civil Court, Small Class Court, and other courts. So how can there
It means that the pecuniary jurisdiction is also applicable, right? Depending upon the value of the suit, we can.
Value of
the claim.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember that we have been fighting for it suit to be filed before Chengalpattu on a under chapter suit, where we could find out a notification issued by the High Court Registrar extending the jurisdiction of the
Applicability of Order 37.
yes. Can you please explain about that, so that the viewers, the participants can have
That is
more
what the
knowledge?
motion itself is very clear. Order 37, Rule 1 says to what courts it applies. There is a proviso clause. I read the proviso clause for better understanding. Provided that in respect of the courts referred to in Class B,
Yes.
Class B says other courts. The High Court may, by notification in the official gazette, restrict the operation of this order only to such categories of suits as it deems proper, and may also from time to time, as the circumstance of the case may require, by subsequent notification of the official gazette, further restrict and not avail. So it is very clear. So the power is vested in the High Court regarding the applicability of Order 37, other than the courts mentioned, civil court as well as a small class court. If there be any other court is constituted for applicability of Order 37, there should be a notification by the High Court. If there is no notification, the cannot file a lay suit under Order 37. Now it is now one down, and in all subordinate courts, suits are being filed under Order 37.
Is there any rationale for extending the jurisdiction? Suppose if it is not, if a particular court does not have a jurisdiction under 37, as a litigant, do I have the right to approach the jurisdictional High Court to extend it? What is the rationale for extending the jurisdiction?
If that is, let us assume visualize a situation where the High Court was not notified. In that circumstance, if you want to file a suit, then the option open to the litigant is to file a writ petition, praying for an issuance of the gazette notification regarding the applicability of Order 37. There is no other way out for the litigant. Writ petition is the only course.
Okay. Thank you.
I have clarified you, or I have given some answer.
He will say yes.
Very much.
He will say yes only.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, Mr. Ramesh Padi, you can unmute yourself. I now request Mr. Prabhakar to raise his question, because he has been waiting much time.
No problem.
So I am just giving an opportunity for him to raise his question.
No problem. Good evening, Sir Prakash.
Good evening.
Good evening. On clarification made by Mr. Ravi Meenakshi Sundaram,
Yes.
he said that you have to file after appearance, the defendant has to file a leave to defend petition.
Yes.
But before that, he has to file a memo of appearance and give a notice to the council on.
That is what Rule 2 says.
Yes. Rule 2,
Yes.
I think Rule 3, Class 3.
His question was whether having to wait for the hearing date for leave to defend.
Yes. But on.
You cannot wait for the hearing date. Let us assume a situation where a summons is served on you and the hearing date is posted after a month. Should you wait for a month?
No, he need not wait, but he has to give a memo of appearance and.
That is automatic. That is automatic.
Yeah, that's
that I have said. At the time of, I have cut short it for the purpose of
okay.
answer.
Okay, no problem.
I think I have explained your query also.
Oh, sure. And he said that leave to defend petition has got to be filed. That's why I clarified. Before that, he has to file a memo of appearance and.
Yeah, that is automatic. See, without filing a memo of appearance, what is your purpose to file an application for leave to defend?
After that, he has to file a summons for judgment,
That is what the duty of the plaintiff.
Yeah. After serving summons.
So now we have visualized a situation. His answer, his query is whether having to wait for the hearing date or we have to file an application beforehand.
Yes.
So if you wait for the hearing date, time will run out.
That that's true. He has to immediately file a memo.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
Right.
Yeah, Brother Kanmani, I think you have raised your hand. You can raise your question now. Brother Kanmani? Brother Kanmani? Yeah, Brother Kanmani, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm audible, brother.
Yes, brother.
Yeah,
Go
you're
ahead.
audible, brother. You can proceed.
In R4P proceedings, the amount has been
Yes.
the amount has been consolidated.
Fixed.
That we can
You mean
file
deferent? Let us assume deferent or willful default.
default.
Yes.
So, shall we file?
Yeah. Yeah. After that is some suit is variable because the amount is liquidated.
Yeah.
Fixed. Fine. On an ascertained sum, you can file after that is some suit. There is no bar at all.
One more doubt. If it is
Yes.
an alternate degree has been passed by RFP by a tribunal, whether we need
Yes.
to file fresh suit under 37 or we can go for an execution of proceedings, EP, by way of EP.
The option is open to you. What you want? What is the relief you want? Whether you want possession or whether you want money. If you want possession, you file a EP. If you want money, it is option is open to both. Both the options are open. You can execute the degree as well as file a suit.
If it is so, it's better choice to go with EP proceedings.
EP, company, you know the difficulty of any advocate or party. My lecture is I told all the problem arises only at the time of execution, not at the time of conducting the case. But you can go for civil suit only.
I think the question session is coming to an end.
Yeah.
And the next session of ours is going to be on 15th May 2020 at 4 p.m. And the topic is on GST, Goods and Service Tax, and our lecture will be given by Mr. Ramesh Kuti. And I don't find any other questions, hands being raised. So I take it granted that there is no questions. And,
I have less problem now.
I now find, I request Mr. Jayanti Shah to have the vote of thanks. Mr. Jayanti Shah. I think Magesh has raised a question. If time permits, we'll go ahead with the question.
Yeah, can ask.
Yeah, Mr. Magesh, you can go ahead with the question. Magesh, you have to unmute yourself so that it will be easy to go on. Is it audible? Magesh, is it audible for you?
Yes. Now it is audible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I was clapping my hands for Mr. Siva Prakash.
I thought you were raising a question.
No, in fact, I am raising a question.
Normally in the law college will say, we raise all our voice for the lecture to keep quiet.
No. It was really very nice session, sir. That's why I was clapping my hands.
Yeah.
We have been. I have both all of you by speaking for more than an hour, so let us relax.
Yeah, I know.
No, sir. It was really a very good session, sir.
Yeah, I now request.
I can find my friend Gautam.
Gautam, I am not able to see in the participant list.
Jayanti?
I think it is named as Galaxy Film, right?
Yeah. Galaxy.
I'm extremely sorry, brother.
No, that's fine. It's my fault that I did not put a name there.
Probably
in the Galaxy.
No, probably you would have been doing this in some other session. You do not identify yourself. But fortunately, you are in a good session, so you can identify yourself.
Fair enough. Whichever way you look at it.
Just let us end, brother. You can go ahead with the session.
No, that's a very, first place, I would like to congratulate Siva for an excellent lecture. Okay, on that, in the first place. And my query is a little jaded in the sense that, see, now with the advent of IBC, where the jurisdiction of IBC has been extended to individuals also, how relevant is summary suit going to be in the coming period of time? What do you think is the advantage of having a summary suit or filing a initiating proceedings under IBC?
IBC, it takes its own speed time. They might.
20 days,
Filing
no?
Filing under commercial suits or under other, that's a beneficial claim, right?
Yeah, adding to Professor Prakash, I think the commercial suits will be much better one.
See, I mean, like all these things to work towards the speedy justice and the relief to the litigant. In that sense, I think it becomes a choice of forum for the. I mean, I think today's litigants have the choice of
forum.
Luxury. I mean, luxury of choosing a forum, which is
again
more.
The cost of. Let me add only one thing, Gautam. The cost of litigation under IBC will be less when compared to this.
Yes. Yeah, even a couple of days back,
and more importantly, they don't have to establish a claim as against showing a prima facie.
But that is a case where there is an ascertainism.
Correct.
Exactly.
No, not necessary. In IBC, ironically, they don't have to look at an ascertained sum at all. That's the amendment that has come through. Which is why I feel that today, in today's thing, IBC may be marginally more advantageous than summary suit. So, which is why
that's why it's a topic of commercial suits.
Correct.
Where I have some knowledge.
Yeah, adding to it, a couple of days back, the Union Law Minister has made a speech, made an announcement that the granting of time under the commercial suits has to be restricted and not more than 3 hearings has to be given.
Correct.
That was his contention was.
And in that case, the Act has to be amended.
Yeah, that I think
we'll have to go under that procedure that is. I mean, that has been the direction that is given for CPC also. No, it's procedural. It is not mandatory.
Yeah.
So it's a directory more than mandatory. So I think in any litigation that's going
beyond 4 months, you cannot extend.
You cannot extend.
You cannot extend the time of litigation.
Anyway.
That is the preclusion under the Commercial Courts Act.
And anyway, congratulations again. It was a lovely lecture. I enjoyed myself thoroughly.
You can unmute yourself, brother, so that we can go ahead with the next one.
Yeah.
I think there is one other troublesome question is going to be launched to the speaker by our uncle Captain Arulmani. So I'm going to unmute him.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. I've been I can only say only one thing. I know Shiva Prakash will definitely deliver a good lecture or he'll make the evening memorable one. But I never thought that he is one person who can really talk very fluently like this, because I haven't seen him. I've seen Anna Nadanrajan, talking in the court, presenting the cases in the court. I've seen him, but I've not seen Shiva Prakash so far, nor Manikandan also. Really, it was, though the subject I was able to accept or understand or assimilate 30% of what he was talking. And even though I could only understand that much, the flow in which he was going, it was really fantastic. Normally at this time, between 4 to 5, I'll be sleeping. My entire sleep was not disturbed, in the sense, I was trying to concentrate more on what he is trying to say, what he is saying, how is he presenting himself, how is he going in a systematic way. It was really, it was a pleasure for me. I wish Tata was there today. I wish him all the best. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody. Thanks to all the friends who have been listening and who have been benefited by this discussion and lecture. Thank you very much.
May I now request Jayanti Shah to give you a vote of thanks. Not able to
Also present, may proceed.
Yeah,
I taken much of the time.
Yeah, madam, is there? What of thanks, madam?
Sorry, sir. I don't know. It was not getting connected again.
We are troubling you.
No, sir. It's a pleasure, sir, that you have given us so much enlightenment about the topic.
Yeah.
I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. First and foremost, I thank our special speaker, Mr. Shiva Prakash, who have shared this knowledge to everyone on summary suits and making the session very interesting and interactive. I thank all the distinguished invitees present here for accepting our invitation. Last but not least, I thank you all my friends for your cooperation in making this this webinar a resounding success. Thank you everyone.